Hello there, I'm Big Alias. How are you? How is everyone? How's your mum? I'm kidding. I'm joking, of course. I already know. How do I move on from that? How do I move on from an introduction like that? Someone please tell me. 2019? This is how I do it. 2019 was a hell of a year for gaming. And, it's one of the tentpole years, I think, for gaming. A lot of people don't, go back and talk about them. Like, 2010 is considered a big year for gaming. I think 05 was considered a big one. Oh, 07? That was a huge one, dude. That was a massive year for gaming. But 2019 was a big one. But I think the reason people don't really talk about it much is because the reason is a lot different. It isn't because we had spectacular games or something huge happened in the space. It was because we had very unique flop games going on. I mean, remember 2019, it's full of those games that we think, oh, that was the game that sucked in the series. But they all stacked up. We had Anthem, Far Cry New Dawn, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Crackdown 3, and Wolfenstein Youngblood, which we're going to be talking about today, and which I think is honestly the best of the bunch. But the thing about this year in 2019 was we had all of these games had finished development, these games where they just plop you into a world and you have to take on these different bases and places, and they were like these looter shooter RPG hybrids a la Destiny and Borderlands, where the whole goal of the game was to build up stronger weaponry and armor so that you could progress through the game. And yes, it did have a main story, but in order to progress through that story, you had to keep building your character up through loot that you find. And the frustrating part about that was that, of course, they ended up selling a lot of that loot and giving you shortcuts through that, and that was the whole reason that the game was structured in such a way. And a lot of these games finished development in 2019 because they were inspired by games that came out a couple of years prior, like the Battle Royale games and stuff like that. So we ended up with a lot of these games, and people hated them. There were so many, and people hated them. Like I said, primarily because they would then sell you the loot, but also because it just completely changed the structure of the game for the sake of making it a more monetizable style of game. And of course, no one liked that. These games became a lot more grindy, time-consuming, and not for the sake of being better, but the sake of being more profitable. And people didn't like it. And that's, I think, a strong reason why people really didn't like Wolfenstein Youngblood, and it's the last game in the series currently. Did it deserve such a bad name? Not as much as we gave it, I don't think so, because there is a lot of good stuff here, and like I said, I do think it is the best of the bunch. This effect of games being like these awful, open world games, I think had the biggest impact on games like Anthem and Ghost Recon Breakpoint. But in this game, there were actually improvements made, and there were things done to the game. For example, the game looks far better than any of its predecessors. The engine has been hugely upgraded here. It looks fantastic. Even to this day, this game is celebrating its 5th birthday this year, and it looks fucking awesome. It looks fantastic. They absolutely nailed the metallic, heavy feeling, not just with the graphics, but with the physics as well. When you attack an enemy, you really feel the harshness of the metal. The lighting is fantastic. Reflections, brilliant. It really looks like a fantastic game, and a very brutal game as it would want to be. And there have been, improvements to the upgrade system. You can now completely customize weapons. And one thing I really like is you can bolt on customization that just improves the weapon and doesn't actually bring something negative with it. Some of them do, but actually, honestly, in the case of most, they are just straight upgrades. And I appreciate a game that freaking does that in this day and age, and the skill tree has been upgraded too, so that's fantastic. So it's all good, huh? Well, despite the fact that it looks great, there's not really much to see. The first big issue with this game is the map, which again is open world. It's not linear. You don't start in one place and go to the next, and that sucks because there are many reasons for that. Firstly, I'll never prefer an open world, but secondly, for whatever reason, they have this open world that's split into different pieces, like many other open world games, like games like Remnant 2 and stuff like that. But they're all the same. I mean, imagine if you played Destiny and it's you can go to Earth or San Francisco or LA or California, and you just go to the same places, the same biomes and areas, and they're not very impressive. It's set in like this Parisian city, and it's just tall houses and alleyways and stuff like that, and that's all you're going through. Nothing more exciting than that, and it never changes, to the point where it has this effect where I don't know, it's so forgettable and so ineffective that I couldn't tell you how big the map is. I don't know how big the map is. I don't really know what's going on in the map because it's so bland and there really isn't much going on in it. The second biggest issue, however, and this could be, the biggest issue, but the second big issue, I suppose I could say, and the reason I really I can't recommend this game, and unfortunately it is my least favorite in the series. It's not the story, it's not the characters, well, not the character writing, it's the co-op. This game is co-op. Unfortunately, it's the only Wolfenstein game to be set around being co-op, and your teammate who will fight with you, sort of, you won't really notice it, will get hit and will go down and has some okay preservation, but for the most part will just go down, and then you have to revive them. And if you don't revive them, you're out. Except for the fact that they do have this shared life system. You have 3 attempts. That's between the 2 of you. So between the 2 of you, you can go down 3 times and then go back up. And once you run out of those, they do not recover after you die and respawn. You have to find them throughout the world in this big chest, and they really don't pop up very frequently either, so you're not going to find many of these. You're going to spend most of your time just dying and then respawning in this situation because you have to get your teammate up. It's such a shame that a game with fantastic gameplay was ruined by all of these just like stupid bits that were added for no reason. Like, you didn't have to make a system where you absolutely, it's imperative that you get your teammate up. You shouldn't have to need to do that. It should be either or. They should be able to go down and you can continue the mission. Now, I know that the game is focused around you playing co-op, but co-op online, but I mean, it's 2024. Who am I going to play with? There is really not much longevity to a game that is where you're expected to play in co-op. No, there should be a grace period afterwards where it trickles out and you can play single player. That's what I want. But when you do play single player, your freaking teammate goes down all the time, and they could be underneath the feet of a giant boss, and you have to run over there and recover them. And if you don't, that's it, you're done. You have to respawn, and the respawns are absolutely atrocious because it's designed like an MMO. It's designed like an MMO dungeon, and it sucks. It's absolutely awful. It's such a shame that a game that looks so great as this and plays as well as every Wolfenstein game nowadays is let down by these just silly systems that it borrowed from other games, a crappy open world, and an awful co-op system holds it back. But if you're willing to deal with those things, it is on Game Pass, and it can be a lot of fun. I'm not saying that it's outright awful. I do think it's better, one of the better 2019 flops, but it's still not. It's just such wasted potential. But there is good gameplay there, so maybe give it a shot. Or if you're prone to being frustrated by annoying gameplay, tweaks here and there, then maybe not. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Wolfenstein 1 Youngblood. I don't know. I mean, like, given that this is the weakest link and it's actually not, unplayable, then I guess I really like this series. And I guess I'll see everyone later.
PlayStation's only $149, and you can also get leading titles.